This podcast is brought to you by Spotify for podcasters. Have you yourself ever wanted to become a podcaster? Well, Spotify makes it simple and easy to do so. You can record, edit, and even distribute your podcast straight from their app. The best part? It is absolutely 100% free. Visit their website, podcasters.spotify.com, for more details, and download the app on your Apple or Android devices today to get started on your podcasting adventure. That's Spotify for podcasters. What is going on, everybody? Travis Fowler Harkrider back with another edition of the Four Corner Podcast. And today I actually have a special guest, not just as an interview, because this isn't going to be anything where he gets to put himself over. I've worked with this guy for almost 7 years. He does it enough when I work with him. So I don't need to give you 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour more.
Fair enough. Oaklafan.com. Go there. See, slide it in.
I saw. That's the only thing you slide in. Anyway, you already know who I am. The man sitting next to me is somebody that I would refer to as my mentor, somebody who I have literally sat next to on commentary during my whole duration, I believe. Even when we've worked for other companies, yes. I think it's always been you and me, yes. And at least a third person in some instances. So, without further ado, I am going to give you his work name, and if he wants to tell you his real name, he can. But this is the infamous CM Burnham.
Infamous in so many ways, especially around this time of year, right?
Oh, yeah.
Lists come out, awards get awarded, and I go into hiding. Yes.
I was going to say, who's hit you up so far for a complaint yet?
There's a list.
Is that why you're clearing your throat for it?
There actually are a few people who are... who just a couple of days after those lists were posted, only one of them actually directly talked to me. Another one chimed in on somebody's Facebook thread, and when I explained to him why he didn't make the list, he was like, "Oh, okay." And then one wrestler's wife posted on a thread, and then messaged me, and I explained to her. This is why they didn't make the thread, and she was like, "Oh, okay, I understand this now." It's just people get bent out of shape so easily about these things, and
then
so silly.
Stop pissing people off.
I just can't help it. I've done it for 18 years now. I mean,
you're gonna start pissing me off because you keep looking at the camera when I'm trying to have a dialogue with you, bro.
You didn't say don't look at the camera.
Oh, my bad. Well, I mean, it's not like I'm looking at you on a webcast here, you know.
Fair enough.
By the way, this is what we do every month. Like, literally, he'll give me a hard time sometimes, and I give him the worst time. So that's pretty much how our dynamics worked from day one. But this man, I sit next to him, and we talk wrestling, almost anything I would think that comes to our mind before we do a show. Because he and I sometimes have very similar thoughts, and then there are times where we have been radically on the other side. And it could be either way. It could be he's radically one way, I'm radically the other. So I thought it would be fun for the special guest spot for this month to be this gentleman, because we can talk about his background a little bit if he chooses to do so. But also, I like having somebody here to just talk wrestling with, because you and I always, and I've said it how many times since I started doing this, where I was like, wait, I need to have you on because we would just have fun.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do here. But I'm going to give him a little bit of the floor. If you would like to, why don't you tell a little bit of your history?
Okay, well, so I was a fan. I became a fan in 1984 with that event on MTV called The War to Settle the Score.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I was an MTV kid. I didn't grow up watching wrestling before that point, but when MTV came on, boom, I was there, and when Vince McMahon started this national expansion and starts pushing the connection with MTV, I'm like, who are these people? They're pretty awesome. And that kind of became the gateway into me. I started with the WWF, as it was then.
Right.
Found Mid-South really soon after that. Then Jim Crockett, and then World Class, AWA. At one point here, we got like 7 or 8 different companies from around the nation.
Just here in Oklahoma?
Just here in Oklahoma.
Okay.
I could watch different wrestling every night of the week. So I didn't actually go to a wrestling show until 1998.
Really?
Even though we had it locally here, Bill Watts running here every couple of weeks. There was only a couple of times I was like, man, I'd like to go. The rest of the time, I'm like, no, I can sit home and watch this stuff and watch other stuff, and I don't have to go. In '98, WCW came, and they had a house show, and a friend of mine had gotten a big passel of people together to go, and one of them, something happened, he had to drop out, and so he called me and said, hey, I got a spare ticket. You want to come? Sure, I'll come. And I discovered then that what they said all that time about it's so much better live is 100% correct. And yeah.
If you haven't ever gone to a live show, you got to do yourself a favor and do so, because it definitely very much is worth it, and it's so much better than just watching on TV. Not to say that TV's not fun too, but it's just so much better when you actually are there and you can get the energy there in the crowd.
Yes, absolutely.
So we got your fandom out of the way. When did you actually get involved?
Okay, so that comes kind of in stages. I started attending indie shows in 1999. July 3rd of 1999, I went to an OPW show here in Tulsa. And sometime shortly after that, I used to read, there used to be a website, or there still is a website, called OneWrestling.com. And there used to be a woman named Georgia Ann Acropolis who I think at one point ran a Bruno Sammartino fan club. But she had a page on OneWrestling.com where she spotlighted indie wrestling very heavily. And she would have people send in results and stuff. So I started sending in results from OPW to her to get them posted here to try to get a little more awareness. Somebody, and to this day I do not know who, somebody found those results and built an old like GeoCities website with those on it, and that got to the booker and promoter for OPW, Rocco Valentino, who thought it was me, that the website was mine.
Right.
So he liked what I did there, and he contacted me through indirect methods and said, I want you to write a fan perspective column for our OPW website. So that was the first thing I did. I wasn't paid for this. I mean, it was just a way to do stuff. That was what I did there. And that was kind of all I did. And I did that for a couple of different companies in Tulsa area. And then in 2002, I was introduced by Brent Albright's wife to a guy who I will refer to as S.K. Fulton.
Okay.
And he knew everything about building websites and wanted to build one about the history of Oklahoma wrestling, but knew nothing about the history of Oklahoma wrestling. And she said, I know a guy who knows all about the history of Oklahoma wrestling, and I was like, I don't know anything about building websites. And so our chocolate and peanut butter got together here, and in 2003, he created the first version of OklaFan, which, so now that website, we believe it was 2003. We don't know for certain, but we don't think it was any later, and we know it couldn't have been any earlier.
But it was right around.
But around 2003, and so 21 years later now, sometime this year, 21 years later, we're going strong with this site, and I've got a staff that joins with me to maintain this thing, and it is. Of all the things I've done in wrestling, the commentary, the managing, the ring announcing, everything, this is what I expect to be remembered for. Mm-hmm. Everywhere I go, I mean, just literally earlier today, one of our broadcast partners was like, yeah, you're the OklaFan guy. I mean, that's what I am.
He did.
I always will be the OklaFan guy. So, that's what I do is go to shows, document results, write stories, and I have a degree in history. And I look at the site as a living historical document about professional wrestling in Oklahoma.
That's awesome. And now, and also just OklaFan, of course, if you need to know the website again, as he stated earlier, oklafan.com. I'll even plug him for that. But he also does managing, commentary, as we've talked about earlier. He's my broadcast partner and has been since 2016, December 2016, if you can believe that. It's been that long already. But at the end of the day, also, he's still a fan.
Yes.
And this guy's fandom is very similar to mine, where I feel like there are some... I think you may actually either agree or even sympathize with this. You have wrestling friends that you get along with, you talk wrestling with.
Yeah.
When you talk about certain perspectives or aspects of storylines or whatever, there's always going to be those friends that tend to go in a far-fetched way. Whereas when you look at what our landscape is, I feel like you're a lot like me, and you can kind of think what you would like, but you still keep it to exactly what's presented to you right now. So, like, you're not going to say, for instance, Randy Orton's going to take on Paul White at the first ever AEW WWE joint venture show, and it's somehow going to get set up over this. Like, you're not that kind of delusional. You look at what's there and just go with it, which is what makes it fun when we talk about wrestling. For me personally, at least.
Yeah.
So, it's been a short introduction for this gentleman here, and I'm sure we're going to go right into talking more about his wrestling times and what he's done. But I think we should get to the meat and potatoes of everything, because he came to me before we even started doing this. This was just kind of a random, hey, you got some time? Let's have some fun, because he wanted to talk to me. There's been a lot of stuff, obviously, within wrestling that's happened since he and I last did a show together, which was in November. We missed December. It's now January. 2 months.
Yeah.
2 months.
What a 2 months.
My Lord. It's been so crazy. Not even just 2 months. The first 5 days. And we have plenty that we could talk about coming on the horizon. WrestleMania season's almost here. We always get stoked for that.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and I'm going to let you actually pick the first thing we talk about.
Well, let's start with the obvious thing.
Okay.
Did you expect to see CM Punk at Survivor Series?
Absolutely not.
No.
I actually had gotten it to a point where I was very much hopeful, and then as time kept going, and I'm guilty as much as the next person, I will read dirt sheets. I have learned over the last year or so to not read them as much and take them for what they're worth, because sometimes they're hit, but there's a lot of times they're miss. This was one of those times where everybody was a miss because nobody thought that. And even Punk himself recently came out, I believe this week, and was like, everything happened day of. Like, he signed his contract, he showed up. Luckily, he lives close to the arena, so he drove.
He said he was calling people. I watched that special. He said he was calling people on the way in there to let everybody know. That was pretty impressive. I did not think. I think maybe we had talked about this and said it was more likely that a return at the Royal Rumble made more sense. The only sense aspect for it came from it being in Chicago, and that was the big draw.
Right.
I had a current student who he and his parents go to a lot of the PLEs around. And they were out there, and I talked to him. I talked to all three of them, actually. But I remember talking to my students. I said, I talked to your dad about this. I just want to talk to you. What was it like when Punk came out? He said that there were these people that just ran past him down the railing to get, and he thought they were going to knock the barricades over to get to Punk. That was how excited they were. He couldn't hear anything when Punk's music came on and the crowd exploded. There was we were shocked when we saw Punk walk out on AEW.
Yes.
And the reaction he got there. This eclipsed that so much. And I can't even imagine. And all he did, he looked better. He physically looked better.
Yes, he did.
And he didn't do anything except come in, stand around, look around, and he even said I liked what he said about he knew where to hit his marks.
Yes.
Listening to the music, to where his marks, and he couldn't hear his music. And so he's having to just kind of go off the instinct and do whatever it is that he knows how to do when he's coming out there. Yeah, that was incredible.
Sorry, by the way, guys, not to interrupt you. Had to move a camera a little bit, so my apologies. Keep going.
He is now... He's basically the biggest star in that WWE has, and AEW just handed them over on a silver platter.
And you and I, we've had several conversations, and admittedly, we've both been somewhat critical of AEW. I know you more than me, definitely, because he has issues with
certain people.
To certain people.
At least a couple people.
And if you need to know what they are, you can call them schmung schmucks, if you will. I know he likes that. Yeah. But seriously, there's a part of me that's like, I could kind of see where AEW was going with him, and it felt like we were getting there just because of all the stuff that had gone on between Punk and them. But I really didn't think we would sit here and talk about the fact that not only did Punk get released by AEW, which to this day I think people still are like, well, you just let your biggest draw go.
Yes.
And handed it over to the competition of all things. I would have never thought by the end of 23 we would be saying, hey, CM Punk's in the Royal Rumble. And
Right?
yeah, and 2 months prior he showed back up at the end of a PLE
Yeah.
and never would have suspected that in my life. Do you think this time around it's going to be better and he's going to have a better experience as opposed to what we know it was at the end?
So I am hopeful that what a lot of people, this is where I get really, one of the reasons I get very frustrated reading things online, Facebook groups and social media groups about wrestling, because Punk is a very divisive person amongst the fandom. And there is definitely a large community out there who is very anti-Punk, who considers him a cancer, who is 100% on the side of the EVPs and that everything AEW did with him was, for getting rid of him, was right and true and proper.
Right.
I'm not in that camp, but I feel like they are overlooking the fact that he is 10 years older and hopefully 10 years wiser than he was before, and he's coming in this essentially of his own accord. He didn't need to go there. He chose to go there.
Yeah.
And I think that I will hope that they have a plan for him where he can accomplish the things he wants to accomplish. The number one I truly expect to be accomplished this year is for him to main event WrestleMania.
Oh, yeah.
They've got 2 nights. He can do just like Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens main evented WrestleMania.
I mean,
night
they
one.
did.
He can main event night one, and it doesn't even matter if he wins the title.
No,
he's
doesn't.
never said that. He just says, "I want to main event WrestleMania." He can do that. He can check that one off, and then we can go on to whatever they're going to do. But I fully expect that one to be fulfilled.
I do
this
too.
year.
Punk and Rollins, you think as well?
Yes.
Me too. I totally feel the same way. And honestly, I'm like you. I don't think he needs to win. He doesn't need to win in order for it to be validated. But do you think he does?
That is such an up in the air question right now for me.
I
will say this.
If you were in charge, what would you do?
If I were in charge, I would have him win, and then I would have Priest cash in immediately.
Okay. I think I've heard that one too, and I don't dislike the creative idea behind that as well. I personally do think Punk is going to walk out as a champion, even if it's just for a cup of coffee at that. And that to me makes the most sense. Because then I remember listening to that podcast that he did with Colt Cabana 10 years ago, and one of the complaints that he always had was that they always would set you up with a story, but they never knew how to follow up. It was like, okay, I go and face Taker. He's gone the next day. What's next for me? I go face Brock. He beats me. What's next for me? You know, as he described it, his stock plummets every time you put me against a guy who's a part-timer and they're going to go away. So do you think that is a perfect way to set him up to then go and feud with Judgment Day as a whole, or just specifically Priest? Because, I mean, that solves a problem that he had before.
I think he could feud with the intention of getting to Priest and possibly working more with Dom. I know that he worked with Dom on the house show circuit this past week. It was this past week. I don't know if he's ever really had any issue or encounters with Balor.
I don't think so.
That would be in particular. I don't even consider JD part of the whole thing.
Why?
He's the flunky.
So?
I know, but he's. It's very clear that they don't look at him on the same level as the rest of the Judgment Day.
Well, and I think that's by design in story right now, how that's supposed to play out. Because eventually I think Priest is going to get out of the Judgment Day.
I've never been a big fan of McDonough. I even when, like, back in the Jordan Devlin days when he was in NXT, he was kind of, okay, he's another flippy floppy guy who talks weird. And then when he came back from COVID and he was JD McDonough and he was like the psycho guy, then I really just backed off. I was like, I don't get this. I don't really grasp this. So I can see him trying to get the Priest, wanting to get the title back, having to battle through Balor, having the battle perhaps through Dom. But I don't necessarily see this as a long-term program because I don't see Punk regaining the title.
Okay.
At least not immediately.
Right.
I don't think he needs it. I think if there's more value in him being the featured attraction guy rather than the running champion. And again, part of this depends on what they do on the other brand, but I feel like the world title is still going to be one of, hopefully one of two, workhorse champions here who can now are regularly featured rather than being the true workhorse and the other one the guest starring title.
Yeah. While we're still on WWE and title conversations right now, I want to talk to you real quick about the Roman Reigns undisputed title situation, because I think that's something we can just easily segue into right now. Because there's been a lot of chatter since Monday.
Yes.
Honestly, I think there's been this chatter since Rock's cameo on SmackDown with Pat McAfee. And that was back in September or October-ish.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So, but this past Monday, we really had it like, oh, this is gonna happen.
Yeah, speaking of explosions.
Yes. But now the question goes to when and how. And I need to know, before we go any details further into it, do you believe or do you think Cody finishes the story, and should it be against Roman?
Okay, so gun to my head, yes, I do. I do absolutely believe it should be against Roman. I don't think anybody else would make sense at this point.
Right.
Not just for Cody, but for Roman as well. I think he has to fall to somebody who has been built up as a strong potential challenger, and that's where Cody's position is. So that eliminates Rock from that situation. I remember a lot way back around that Pat McAfee appearance, that the people were talking, okay, well, Rock and Reigns will be on night 1 of WrestleMania, and then Reigns and Cody will be on night 2. And even back then I was like, no, you
because that's what we thought 39 was going to do.
You don't do that. You say we put one title one time and the other one the other time. That makes it special. So what I've read, which makes a lot of sense, is that Rock and Reigns is in Australia,
which is what I would prefer.
At the Elimination Chamber.
Yep.
I believe that Punk wins the Rumble.
Okay.
But that they build it pretty heavily as this is Cody's opportunity to finish the story.
Right.
So it's sort of like the Shawn Michaels bit where he had to win, and it was so close in that one Rumble with JD.
Yes.
So now it looks like Cody's lost his chance, and then he gets into the Elimination Chamber and he wins the Chamber match, and people forget, because they don't play it up as much, that the Chamber match is the other pathway to a world title.
This is what you and I talked about one time when we originally discussed, and you were like, I am not in favor of Cody winning. I don't want Cody winning it twice. And I said the same thing, but then I brought it to your attention. I was like, yeah, but they still have the Chamber.
Yeah.
And in the past, they have used the Chamber match to determine the number 1 contender.
Yeah.
And that's where I believe it could go. That said, though, there is one roadblock to that.
Okay.
Cody's on Raw.
Yes, but I don't think that matters.
It won't matter depending on how they go about the Chamber.
Right.
Because, in my opinion, the only way that you can make that work story-wise, and I'm sure they thought of this too, is something that they did very similar with the World Title Tournament, which is incorporate both Raw and SmackDown.
Yes, 100%.
3 from each brand.
Yes, that's what I actually expected them to do.
I think so
too. And then the winner gets to pick, and immediately in the front of your mind you have a Raw guy, and the fan base is going to think it's going to be a triple threat. It's going to be Cody and Punk going Rollins, and then Cody says, I want the other one. I want to finish the story I couldn't finish last year.
Yeah.
And take that.
It's either going to go that route, or what I think they'll go with that as well is if Punk does win, which I'm with you. I kind of have a favor that Punk is going to end up winning it. And I don't have a problem with that either. But I think you need to have Punk pick who he's going to face first. Like, you need to do that way in advance before the Chamber. That way you have it specifically that the Chamber says the winner faces Roman at Mania.
I think you need to do that in addition here, because I don't know for sure if they're going to fully flip Rollins as a heel.
Oh, they won't. I don't think you really need.
I don't think he has to either. I don't. He's got a personal issue with Punk.
Yes,
and personal issues draw money. JR said that many times. So I don't think they have to, but they have to build that more carefully, and I think they need the time to build that more carefully, as more than just a world title match. There's the personal aspect in there. And so you can build up the drama with that one while you're getting Cody positioned over to challenge for Roman by getting him through the chamber as well.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense too. I'm with you. I've seen so many people talk about it, and I'm kind of glad this didn't end up working out, but it also frightens me a little bit because they're true. This is also one thing where I'm like, God, it feels so good to talk about unpredictability in wrestling, because for over 10 years plus, we've always been like, oh, this is pretty. And WWE, of all things, it's been like, oh, we know where this is going to go. You can see it right in front of you. I do believe AEW's helped with that, by the way, but that's
no. I will agree with that. I think that that history has shown that Vince thrives on competition.
And this ain't even Vince anymore.
That's true. Even though he says he doesn't want it, he wants to wipe it out, and he succeeded in doing that. The history shows that without that driving force to make him or whoever better, then people just sit back and be complacent. And now that there is something out there that was presented as a threat and that still draws eyes, that has motivated the powers that be to decide to elevate their efforts and make things more exciting over there.
Which, from a financial standpoint, we can both still agree that, yes, it is still a competitive market between the two companies. I think you and I both share the opinion, though, that AEW and WWE, two separate products, and it's very poignant to see, especially if you're somebody, and maybe if you don't even need to be in the business to see that, but I think both of us being in wrestling as it is, we can tell what the differences are, and it's like, oh yeah, no, they are totally different companies, totally different products. That, though, the concerns that I have, someone was talking about Rumble when it came towards Roman originally, when we thought it was going to be a one-on-one of Reigns and Orton, which I was in favor for. I'm also still very much okay with the Fatal 4-Way. But somebody was bringing up, they've talked about it on Busted Open Radio before. I saw it over on X, Twitter, however you want to refer to it as. They said the same thing. You protect Roman in the Fatal 4-Way where he loses the title, but he didn't lose. And I personally think that would be stupid.
Yeah.
Like, you've built his record reign up so much to lose it off of a technicality of not having to be pinned.
There is no reason,
None.
The way that they have built Reigns and that title reign, there's no reason for him to lose it at any event
other than WrestleMania. Yes, thank you. That is the exact same thought I have. But somebody was like, okay, you have Orton win the title at Rumble, which frees up Roman and Rock, because Rock and Roman doesn't need to have a title, and it doesn't.
It doesn't.
But
right. But it still if you're running a first PLE in Australia, you want the heaviest draw you possibly can get.
Yes.
And having a title match with a guaranteed star, bringing in here somebody that is believable, that to the casual fans they can look and say, this guy could be the guy to do this.
Yes.
Then from a marketing perspective, it makes 100% sense to leave the belt on Roman and go with that.
I completely agree. And someone was bringing up with the fact that Perth, Australia, when it comes to the event time, that over here stateside, it would be a 5:30 Eastern time or 4:30 a.m. Eastern time.
That's what I wondered about that. Yeah.
Yes, and it's like, okay, I understand where you're coming from in that regard of the early morning not being a good draw for people stateside. But you got to remember, this isn't for the States.
No.
This is an event that they're building up for Australia, so they want it to have a huge implication to it. So I do believe, we're looking at Elimination Chamber being Rock and Reigns. Do you think personally that is something that they really should save to do a Mania for, or do you think it really needs a WrestleMania at all? Do you think it's good enough to put on Chamber on its own?
I think it is a featured match. I think it's a marquee match. I think in the old Gorilla Monsoon voice that this is a match that could be a main event anywhere in the world, and it literally is.
Yes.
I mean, if it weren't the conditions of going, if this were not their first PLA in Australia, I would look at this and go, maybe you should have saved this for one of the big four.
Yes.
But again, marketing, they want the big draw, and this is going to put the butts in the seats down there. So no, it doesn't have to be at Mania in this circumstance. I think it's perfectly fine where it is.
I do too. I actually don't have an issue with it being at Chamber because honestly, whether I'm waking up at 3:30 to watch it in the morning or whatever, or wait until I'm up and guess what? Hey, the event's already happened. I can go back and watch it on demand at any time.
Yep.
And I think that might be WWE's thinking is like, okay, well, even though it has an early start time, you have the benefit of going back and watching it anytime you want. And unlike when we were seeing it in the 90s and the 2000s, you don't need the rating or the pay-per-view eyes right that second to get a good draw or to get a good return from it. It just needs to have a way to be accessible to viewers to watch. So I don't think that hurts it either. And I honestly think it would drive more people to get up and watch it because there are fans. I mean, shoot, Wrestle Kingdom was just this past week.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And Tom, one of the guys we work with, he goes by the ring name Tommy Dean. He was having a freaking little watch party on Facebook with it. So there's people that will get up early to watch pro wrestling in another country if they want to see it bad enough. And I think that would be one of those things where, oh yeah, anybody who wants to see it, you're going to get up and watch it, you know? And I think that goes good. Just overall, WWE's just had a strong card and a roster is what I was going to get at mainly over the last year. They have built up their roster to be a pretty star-studded roster now. I mean, they have their pick of baby faces that they can go with. It's not just like I would say Roman was the last Vince project where he only wanted one guy at the top.
Yes.
And now we've had him as a heel, which is what we all wanted anyway. Right. And in that time frame, think of the baby faces we've got. Cody, Rollins, Punk, Jay, Sammy, Kevin.
Knight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Orton.
Yeah.
Like,
Orton, yeah.
There's literally a plethora of guys, and some of them have bigger names than others, sure. But they all have that main event feel to them, where you could put them into a main event program and it feels just fine. I think WWE's in the best position they've been in quite some time. Because how hell of a good problem is that? Oh, wait, look at all these pieces that we have to play with, and WrestleMania is right around the corner. Oh, by the way, it's WrestleMania 40, so you know it's going to be a big... Oh, and by the way, we're in Philadelphia, which is close enough to our own home territory of New York that we're probably going to draw a crowd. Oh, and by the way, we also could probably get Rock to making a cameo appearance, Cena, Austin, and we have a stellar card to go with it. So I'm stoked for March to get here. And also with Triple H being at the creative helm, I don't think we have to worry about, oh, look at all these unworthy matches of being on a card.
Or these ridiculous self-indulgent things that don't make any sense.
Although I will say that the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team Showcase matches that they had last year, for the men at least, on night one, where it was like Strowman and Ricochet and all that, ended up being a lot of fun to watch. Like, it was like, oh, okay, I'm not actually mad that you guys pulled out some fun stuff in this. All right, everybody, we're actually going to stick a pin in the episode right there because, as Burnham and I tend to do when we start talking pro wrestling, we get very long-winded, and we ended up recording an hour's worth of content for one episode. So because of that, I've decided to actually break it up into a special two-part episode. You just heard the conclusion of part one, and part two will be coming your way this Wednesday, so be on the lookout for that. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, like and share this video around. Also, let us know in that comment section down below, what do you want out of WrestleMania this year? Do you think Cody finishes his story and does it need to be against Roman Reigns? Or do we get Rock and Roman at Mania instead of Chamber? Sound off in the comments down below. Make sure that you go and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And on X, you can follow me personally at Travis_4CP. And once again, be on the lookout for part two of my co-host edition of the Four Corner Podcast with CM Burnham. Until then, take care and continue to love pro wrestling.